Peace and grand rising to the sovereign, original, indigenous, natural, divine heirs. Today is October the 20th, 1442 on the ancient moon calendar, 1441 on the ancient sun calendar, and 2021 on the Greco-Roman or civil calendar, the calendar that we created for our subjects. All rise and stand. This is a sovereign, original, indigenous, ancient, Al-Moroccan, Moorish American court action. I am Sovereign Living Justice, Pauline Denise Ritchie, in capitis diminutio nolo, in red ink, in propria persona si juris, in proprio solo, and in proprio reckordes. My free chosen sovereign appellation is light to jury bay, in capitis diminutio nolo, in red ink, in propria persona si juris, in proprio solo, and in proprio reckordes. We are the original, indigenous, ancient, natural, divine, Al-Moroccan, Moorish American ascendants of the great pharaohs of Kemet and of the ancient Moabites and Canaanites. Our full faith, trust, credit, allegiance, and energy are hereby vested in ourselves, for we are the ancient, de jure, Moorish National Republic federal government, the Moorish American, and the ancient Empire State of Morocco. We hereby exercise all sovereign rights at this time and at all points in time. First, we do want to mention that we are currently right in the middle of our 3-day nationwide fast, the full moon fast. So today, the 20th, is the full moon for the month of October. And to those who are fasting, I can feel your energy. We are connected, and we're connected with everyone anyway, specifically in that particular endeavor. And also, for those who may have missed the announcement, or you may have not started the fast yet, feel free to go ahead and fast with us these last 2 days, today and tomorrow. And then tomorrow night at midnight, for those who started it at midnight on the 19th, then, we will adjourn the fast until the next full moon. So every month, when there is a full moon, at the time of the full moon, the day before and the day of and the day after the full moon, we fast. And how you choose to fast is up to you. It can be water only. Most of us do this whole 72 hours with just water. And then some just fast from meat, some fast from negative energy, etc. So we wanted to just make sure that we acknowledge our fast. And also when we fast, we're fasting for something specific. So, for example, with this particular fast, my goal was to manifest some things, and there's of the things that I set forth to manifest, all have manifested except one, and that one I'm still working on. So I have until tomorrow to manifest it. And that requires me to do some work. So that's what we're working on. We started working on that manifestation and that demonstration a week ago. And I said that by the end of the fast, I'm going to have the demonstration finished. So that the day after the fast is over, we can put that demonstration in the mail or deliver it however we choose to do it, and get it where it's going with fasting, clear, pure, sovereign energy going with it. So with that being said, I'm going to put something in the chat a link that we must see because we want to be relevant to what's going on right now. We gotta look at what's happening around us in our territory with the demise of the corporate structure and see what are they basing what they're doing on and why they're doing the things they're doing. Okay? What we have to know what we're seeing when we look at the events surrounding what we're doing. I was doing some study and found that there is something that the Rothschild, Rockefeller, Board of Education system, corporate system, has been basing everything that they've been doing with the children at school. For example, during this quote-unquote lockdown piece, where the subjects were locked down, some of the schools were, the children, the parents were willfully bringing the children to the school, willfully wanting the children to go back into the schools, and then when the children get to school, the school then says, uh-oh, we're on lockdown, and if we want to keep your children overnight, we can. And we can do whatever we want. We can vaccinate them. We can call the policy enforcers and have them arrested. All of that. And I will say this about those hybrids and the foreigners, and I don't want to say hybrids because they are, even though they are hybrids, I want to put it in its proper context where the corporate structure is concerned, because there are some hybrids that are good subjects on our land. They follow the law and all of that, and they know their place, and they acknowledge our sovereign status and do it as they should, as they agreed to do when they got here. So the schools have been doing things, but contrary to popular belief and contrary to what they want us to believe, they are they're looking at some laws and some things that were put in place, and all they're doing is turning it upside down and abusing it until we say, no, that's not, until we properly rebut it. They're seeing some things in writing, and then they capitalize and hypothecate the writing. And when we're not in our proper status, they say, you know, the meeting is unlocked, nobility. Thank you for that. Then they commit to violating the Moors and doing all types of madness and craziness. And then we'll be thinking, why are they shooting people down in the street? Why are the policy enforcers on the campuses of the education camps and the schools? And, people are saying that's not, and then why are they calling the FBI on the parents and investigating the parents when the parents have some grievance that they're bringing to school board meetings, etc. Now, we know education camps is for animals. Education is for animals. We don't do education. We do erudition, which is what we're doing now. Erudition, the difference being, erudition is highly elevated. We're looking at what we're seeing from the principles that govern what we're looking at. So with erudition, we're getting to see what it is that the education camps were set up on. It is the science, yes, Justice Yezreel, it's the science of why those education camps even exist. And when you're in them, because we grew up, most of us, in these, and actually all of us did, I don't care what school you went to, it was under the corporate status, simply because we hadn't done what we're doing now. Okay? So, what we want to focus on is Just one moment. Let me make sure. So what we want to do is take this erudite look down at that inferior system and see that they're not lawless, they are incompetent though. And the only time they are lawless is when we're not in our proper place giving proper competent commands. So this treatise, a treatise on the law of public schools. Let's take a look at it. I put the link in the chat. So let me pull that up on the screen so we can see it, because I found out some things in that I knew there had to be a basis for what they were doing, but I wanted to see it in writing. And now that we see it in writing, we want to show it to you so that you know how to govern your affairs with regard to the heirs and Moorish science and our Moorish school and erudition teaching and learning. Because education camps are nothing more than quote-unquote corporate court institutions set up to govern children, the heirs. That's what they're there for, to govern the heirs. And to steal and to take. So let's take a look at this, because this is, I was absolutely just blown away by what I saw with this document. Here it is. Taking a little bit to manifest on the screen. Okay, there it is. It says right there in black ink, Education Library. So we know. State Normal School, Los Angeles, California. All we're doing is looking at where everything is coming from, so that as we continue to create a treatise on the law of public schools in big black ink, Counselor at Law, Finley Burke, Council Bluffs, Iowa. And this is produced at New York in 1880. Now, please notice more that there's no zip code on that address right there. That's a mailing location. I just wanted to point that out. Just as we're looking at how things are identified. So, but that's just the beginning. And they just say the corner of John Street. Wow. So, in this treatise, we want to look at first, because there had to be a court involved in this treaty. There had to be a court involved. The court that was involved is the United States Congress. And it's not a real court, it's a fake one. Okay? Just one moment. Let me get that out of here too. Just one moment. Make sure you keep everything. All right. It says right there on the screen, entered according to Act of Congress for the year 1880 by Finley Burke in the office of the Librarian of Congress at Washington. Doesn't even say Washington, D.C. We'll talk about that at a later time. So That's another reason why we are encouraging the Moors to send every document. So, can you hear me? I want to be sure that we can hear because my phone just did something there. Islam. If you could just let me know in the chat. Hopefully you can. Okay, great. Thank you. So we're encouraging all Moors to send your documents to the Library of Congress with Dillarium, with each and every document. Send some Dillarium with it. And again, we're not paying any fees, okay? We're just notifying them so that they can put it in the record, what we're doing here at America. Because, see, we can see that they entered these things, and when you see what they entered in, by way of this book right here, just one book, and they said, this is how we're going to do things. So I want to take you straight to the point, page 68 of this document. Now, we did say, and they put it right here in the preface, they started right out in the preface talking about a court. Almost every court in the land has to do with questions growing out of our public school system. And in reality, the public school system started in a court. And everything that they do is by court action. That's why everything we do must be at court action. That's the first sentence in this book. They're telling you that everything has to be done by court action. So let's go down to page 68. Let's look at it. Here it is. We're talking about jurisdiction over the heirs and how these schools find it suitable for them to just vaccinate without consent, without anything. But consent does not look like we thought it looked. That's why we're doing all the stuff we're doing, Moorish. Termination of those corporate contracts is major. Here on page 68, it says, an infant possessing the requisite qualifications may, with the assent of his parent or guardian, contract to teach school. An infant with the possessing the requisite qualifications may, with the assent of his parent or guardian, contract to teach school. It says where a minor with his parents' consent contracts for himself, or where he is compelled to go abroad and do for himself, the minor is entitled to receive his earnings, and payment to him is a full satisfaction. It has been held, however, that emancipation of a minor does not enlarge his capacity to contract, but merely entitles the minor to his earnings. and then they put some footnotes here. And those footnotes, we'll come back to that in just a minute because, of course, they're talking about bloodline and birthright. It says further, it is well enough to bear in mind that as a general rule, an infant who makes a definite contract to perform services may put an end to it whenever he chooses. In such a case, the infant may recover proportional compensation for the services performed, subject to any reasonable offset. Although no suit can be maintained against a minor for breach of contract of service, yet damages sustained by reason of such breach of a contract may be set off against the minor's claim for services. Let's read a little further. It says, at common law, married women are disabled from making such contracts. So the infant can make a contract, but a married woman cannot make a contract. They want the infant. They want the babies, the heirs. It says, but in many of the states' legislation for the removal of this disability has been adopted. Let's go back up to these notes up here. Right here. And I want to start at where the notes start. The notes start right here. It says, in some of the states, trustees or directors are prohibited by statute from employing their near relatives, and such contracts are made void. Thus, in New York, no person who is within 2 degrees of relationship by blood or marriage to any such trustees shall be so employed as teachers, except with the approval of 2/3 of the voters of such district present and voting upon the question at an annual or special meeting of the district. So we could open up a whole dialogue about relationships by blood or marriage. In other words, is there some amalgamation or some relationship between the parties? What is 2 degrees of relationship by blood or marriage? What is that? What does that even look like? Who measures that? Who says, oh, you're only 1 degree of relationship by blood or marriage? Or, oh, you're 3 degrees of relationship by blood or marriage. Who makes that determination? Those who are governing the school. Because they take that even further when it comes to the children. So, when you talk about infants possessing the requisite qualifications, what in the world qualifies an infant to contract? Because, see, we didn't know that when we send the heirs to those public school camps, that it is at that point that all bets are off for what it is that is our will for our children. All bets are off. All bets are off. So we can say, no, I don't want my child to be vaccinated. Well, the minute you put the child on the bus or drop the child off at the school camp, all they have to do is say, little Johnny or little Mary, everyone is getting these vaccines. Are you in? Because everyone who gets the vaccine gets a piece of candy and an A in the class. And we know your mommy will get you if you don't get an A. So little Mary says, yeah, sure, let's do it, and I want my A. Well, they contracted with an infant. And the thing is, that's two infants contracting together because the teacher is an infant too, at law. Anyone working in education camp is considered an infant. Anyone working as a court or a corporation is an infant when the Moors are when we're in our rightful place. And that's why they said so many things about the tail wagging the dog, and the crazy people are running the insane asylum. Because those that were pretending to be the quote-unquote government were actually infants. That means all of them. Anyone in a corporate capacity is operating from a status of an infant. What does that mean for us? And that's why whenever we would go into those fake courts in the past, they would automatically put us at infant status and then start telling us what to do and locking people up, throwing people in jail. How do you put someone in infant status? You operate as a corpse and you capitalize their name. That's how you put them in infant status. That's why when we went in there to those fake courts, those infant, corporate, incompetent courts, that everything, I don't care what you said about how you identified yourself, they would put it in black ink, and black means dead in this case, dead ink, and capitalize it. And then they just made you an incompetent infant. Just by virtue of you being in a daycare center court, a Toys R Us corporate court. And then what happens? All of your little rights are just gone because infants don't have any rights. But they will let infants speak and say, oh, I'd like to contract. Because they know they got you already. And that's why anything issued by a court is going to be unlawful, incompetent, and don't expect any rights coming from no corporation. Because they're incompetent, and if we had allowed them to continue putting us in that status, supposedly, because they can't change our status, but we didn't rebut it properly and competently until now. And when I say until now, I mean all of us as a whole. Then they say, okay, at law, their courses and considered incompetent, so they're saying, oh, well, we got to make them, we got to put them, like, we got to create them equal to us. That's where the upside down of that all men are created equal piece is coming in at. Is they're saying if you come to us, we're going to create something that's equal to a corpse or a corporation or an infant. And then we're going to start telling you what to do because we know you don't know any better. The insane are running the asylum. And they were the corporate asylum. And this is the kind of stuff they've been going off of since 1880. And then they said, okay, let's keep this out of their eyes. Let's keep it up here so that the infants can't see it, so that they'll just think, oh, all we have to do is quote the Constitution and tell them some stuff, and they'll stop doing what they're doing. No, we had to correct our status and say we're not infants. We're the heirs. And in fact, not only are we not infants, but you are an infant. Corpse. You're dead. Now you start getting into birthright and the birth of a dead entity. And we could talk about the living heir being born, and then the afterbirth coming out and being the entity that is not breathing, the afterbirth and all that comes out after that, and how they took possession of that and they said, no, the heirs were born dead. That's what their paperwork and documents were trying to say. The heirs were born dead, and we're the living. That's what the corpses were trying to say when they know that they were neither. And then ultimately, and this is why the termination of all corporate contracts is so important here, especially for our heirs, is the birth certificate by the corpses is the first contract that says, okay, we have a baby here, an infant here that was born. We know there's an heir in the delivery room. There's a matriarch in there who just had this heir that she has turned over to the corpses. And then what do the corpses and the harbor masters in the delivery room say? They say, yes, and they are called doctors, because doc is a sea name that has to do with putting them on out to sea. And what do they say? They say, we have an infant here. Let's give this infant some shots before we give it back to mom. And then they look at the infant and they say, infant, do you rebut us giving you shots and causing you to have autism and all this other stuff? Do you rebut that? And the infant, even if the infant, will the infant rebut it competently? They say, okay, the infant didn't rebut it, so let's go ahead and give this baby all types of vaccinations that contain the disease and make the baby sick. Because the Moors are not delivering their own babies. So we'll just use our incompetent thinking and do what we want with the heirs, and then hand it back to mom and say, okay, you are not the parent, you're just a ward of the state, and so is the baby. Heirs, listen. All we had to do was properly rebut the status. That's the beginning. Nationality is the beginning. It's the beginning of stopping the madness. And then creating a sovereign living affidavit, living birth affidavit. Yes, they call the mom the informant on the birth certificate, yes. Because guess what? I'm surprised they didn't say put infant in front of her. Where's she supposed to sign? I'm surprised. And would we have signed those birth certificates incompetently if they had even put infant? But informant should have told us something was not right. Why wouldn't the word mother be there? Or father be there where they actually autograph? Now, here is saying that infants can teach school. They're telling you who's been teaching. They're telling you who's been teaching. They're actually admitting their own status with this entry into the Library of Congress. So we got to now rebut everything that's in the Library of Congress and then send it to them. And here's the thing about the heirs. The heirs are not infants. They're not. Even at birth, they're not infants. Not according to the corporate definition of infant. They're not. Especially when we are competent to properly appellation them in red and all lowercase letters. At birth. There is so much in this book about where everything comes from and the contracting and all of that. And throughout this book, they talk about infants contracting. They talk about taxation of the schools. And I want to point something out also with regard to at the beginning of this book. Let me just make sure that I get to that page. I looked at the library, I looked at the table of contents. And the table of contents is actually quite telling. Just the order that they have things. I wanted to point this out too. Digitized by the Internet Archive in 2007 with funding from Microsoft Corporation. So now tell me that the corporations don't know what's going on. Tell me that the ones over there talking about depopulation don't know who the Moors are. And I will say that that's not true. That they do look at bloodline and birthright. That they do look at the status. It's right there on the screen. They're the ones putting these things in. And here's the thing. We're not even mad at them. Because now we get to see. And let me say this. The title of the document is treatise. What does that mean? Look that word up. Treatise. Sounds a lot like the word treaty, doesn't it? That means that somewhere along the way, someone was trying to implement something and make it the law for everyone. For everyone, regardless of what we think about it. But let's look at the table of contents. The very first chapter, page 9. Why is it page 9? If you ever want to see things that have to do with the Moors, look in any document, page 3, page 9, page 13, or chapter 3, chapter 9, chapter 13, and you're going. And if you know how to read the way our teachers have taught us how to read, you will see everything there that says Moors. This is not about the Moors. If they're talking about taxation, then we'll find something in there that says that provides the loophole for the Moors to not be taxed and not be a part of it. They'll mention status or they'll mention Federal Reserve debt notes. Then we know, okay, when we see that, that means they're not talking about us. But chapter 1, taxation for public schools. Number 1, brief history of the subject. They're not talking about anything other than people when they talk about subjects. A brief history of the subject. Remember in the Circle 7 Quran of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science as divinely prepared by our prophet, Chapter 29 is magistrate and subject. And they're telling you here that education camps are for the subject. That's why they wanted to give you a brief history of the subject. And then it says the power to tax for school purposes. Who has the power to tax? Read the document. And we'll place the link to this document under this video so that you can actually go through it. Matriarchs, you are highly encouraged to get this and at least look at page 68 and 69 so that you can see what they have been doing with regard to those teachers in these education camps are not qualified to teach erudition to the heirs. They are infants because that system allows for infants to teach and for infants to contract. Well, if they're infants, if the teachers are infants and the children are there, where's the government? Who's governing? We'll show you who's governing in just a minute. We're just going to go through it really quickly. Chapter 2, exemption from taxation of property used for education purposes. Rules of construction. Whether property must be actually used for educational purposes. In other words, number 2, they're looking for a way out. Get some property. And does it actually have to be used for education? Or can we just say that it is and then use it to colonize the land and to steal, attempt to steal the birthright and bloodline? And then this is going to be, they're here talking about elections. If you'll notice, and we should have known this by looking at the schools, but I'm grateful that we know now. Back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and in some cases now, where they were having quote-unquote corporate elections, they would have the corporate ballot boxes and things at the school. And they would say, okay, this junior high school or this senior high school or this elementary school is where you go to vote. I remember that. Why do you think that is? That they would put them there strategically. And that's why we don't vote in their elections, their corporate elections. Because if you're voting, you're agreeing that you're an infant and a corpse, that they can tell you what to do. See, they try and say that if you vote, that's making your voice heard. No, it's not. It's the opposite of that. It's muting yourself. And then they will put it in the school, because if you go there and you cast your vote there at the school, you're agreeing that it's okay for them to vaccinate your people and and keep them overnight and throw them in jail and all of that. You're saying I'm okay with that because I'm agreeing to be mute and not say anything. So that's why the FBI, the corporate FBI, and all of them are able to go to a school board meeting and start investigating so that they can throw folks in jail. Why is that? Why is that? It's because they're all infants. They agree to be infants. Infants can't speak. You can contract, but that's only for them to take complete jurisdiction over you. That's the only reason they allow that infants are allowed to contract, is the infant has free will to contract, but the contract is very limited. In this book, all it said was that the infant can contract and they can be paid for services if there's no offset. If there's no, and you better believe there's an offset. That's going to leave the infant in debt. And in a debt-based economy like the corporates have, because we don't have a debt-based economy, we're the creditors. Yes, ooh, that's good. In the chat, the Justice Yezreel put voting and voter is Christian property status. Yes, it is. It is inferior. Voting in a corporate system it makes anyone. Now, I'll say this about the Christians. The Christians that we said could come here and be on this land, number one, they're automatically in corporate status. Number two, they are the property of the Moors. They're subjects. Some may not agree with that. Look it up. Look it up. Magistrate and subject. That's in the Holy Quran. But even in the Biblioteliotheque, it talks about slavery and how the slave should obey their master. Well, slave, Slav, subject. That's why we were treated the way we were treated in that corporate system that we could never be a part of, but we just thought we were. Because books like this were hidden, we didn't know. That when our child went to those education camps, that as soon as our child opens the mouth, they say, do we have a contract with the infant? We're infants, we got to make them infants too. Oh, the child said they wanted something to eat. Well, that sounds, this is corpses talking. It sounds like the mother is not feeding the child, so let's call Child Protective Services and send them to their residence. And then we can take the child and eat off of them for 18 years, etc. Very, very, what we don't know. But ignorance of the law is no excuse. This information is being put out here. We must be ourselves. And then it talks here in chapter 5, you're talking about quote-unquote school officers, and that's in all capital letters. They knew how to put it. And the first chapter, the first article there, brings in the corporation. United States Commissioner of Education. That's how you know that this is a military operation, that education camps is military. Because you call them in the military. That's military. Birth certificates are military documents. So let me take it back to this being a military operation, or them pretending to be government. Let's go to page 77 of this document. Let's see, where are we right now? Page 40. Let's go to page 77. Oh, wait a minute. Let me go back to page 40, because they were talking there about school officers, and we need to know who it is they're calling school officers, because I believe there's policy enforcers involved in being school officers, etc. I mean, this is going to be a great read for those who need to know. Are the Moors mentioned in here? Yes, we are. It says here, now they're talking about the Moors right here. This is page 42. And page 42 it mentions the Constitution and all of that. Okay, but I want to show you right here. When they talk about the national government being very liberal in the donation of land, they're talking about the Moors. There was a series of land grants, etc. Yes, Justice Jezreel says Jesuits are soldier priests. Yes, that's why they call them generals, postmaster generals, and doctors, and those are all military positions. A teacher in a corporate setting is a military position, and they were calling it, quote, government position, but even down to the garbage man, that was even a, quote unquote, civil service job. Well, civil service, that's a government position still, isn't it? The civil servants are government people, quote unquote. Corporate government, which is not real government. So look here, they're admitting the national government has been very liberal. Well, what's the difference between the United States government that they mentioned in the table of contents just a minute ago and the national government? We're the national government. They're not a government at all. They're a corporation. But look at the sentence. The national government has been very liberal in the donation of lands and of the proceeds arising from the sale thereof. Yet the schools have been supported mainly by voluntary taxation voted by the people, and this taxation and the apportionment of interest on the permanent funds have necessitated the employment of officers essentially the same in nearly all the states and territories. So where does the education camp, and this is where we have to take responsibility, tell me that they don't know that they're on our land when it's right here in the Library of Congress? Yes, they know that every school is on our land. But if we weren't rebutting any of the things that they were doing, and we can't just rebut it, proper rebuttal, let me say this because we can just rebut it. Proper rebuttal it means not only saying that what they're doing is fraud and invalid and not the law, but then it's showing them, no, this that the Moors are doing, created by us, for us, is the law on this land, and it's the law for the citizens too. The citizens have no protection without the Moors standing up, and they know that. It's proof. That's just a little more proof right there. Them talking about a national government donating lands. That means that they didn't get them, that the land didn't belong to them. No public education camp is on their own land. They're on our land. I don't care what kind of contracts and paperwork they threw around. So then how is it that they can call a policy enforcer and have heirs arrested at public education camps? How is that? Because merely by us being in there, the public education camps are court actions. Those are courts. Inferior fake courts, corporate courts. They do everything by court action. Let me prove it. When you go into fake courts, what do they say? What's the first thing they say? All rise or stand. They say all rise, and then a fake walks in. They say all rise. A fake judge with a black death robe walks in. And that fake judge, quote unquote, doing business as judge, not really a judge though, is escorted in by a paramilitary member, generally called a bailiff. And that fake sits down in the chair, and then the fake says, okay, be seated. what just happened. We talked about this previously. So then let's relate that to the school. Because see, what just happened there in that description of them saying all rise and then a fake walking in and sitting everybody down, that means that anybody who was living in there, then the fake judge just said, okay, good, we got their consent to use their sovereignty against them because we just made them, they agreed to be an infant by being here. They agreed to be an infant, a corpse. So can you hear me? Hopefully you can hear me. Let me just look on the sound meter. Okay, yeah. Islam. So they have always known that they were on our land, but let me prove that they're doing court actions in there and that they have infants contracting. When the children get into the fake school, what do they have them do first thing in the morning? Stand, put your hand over your heart, and say the Pledge of Allegiance. That's a court action. That's a court action. That's why you have to stand for it. That's why you have to stand up. That's a court action. And that's again, that's the children, okay? They're contracting with our heirs. And it's a spiritual contract, or else you wouldn't have to put your hand over your heart. But that's taking an oath to a war flag. And then they capitalize everyone's name in the record. And then they say, okay, let's teach them how to write like infants and corpses. Don't they? Yes, they do. And then every day that our heirs were in those camps, there was some fiat being passed every single day at lunchtime. And even if your heirs brought their lunch to school, they still put a certain amount of fiat, I think it would be like $1 and something, in the budget, just because the heir was there. All of that is contracts that say to them they can vaccinate and take and steal and have their little wild animals coming into the school with guns, shooting up everybody. And no one pays the price. No one pays the price. because everyone consented. And that fiat was going back and forth. They actually had to find a way to get the fiat going back and forth, so they started charging for books and charging for lunch and all of that, when all of that stuff originally was coming from home. But they said, no, we got to get some fiat flowing here so that we can continue to get their consent. That's how you know. And then let's go to page 77, because I was headed there too. And again, we donated the land, so we have to take responsibility for that and get everything back in alignment like it's supposed to be. We have to do that. Here they're talking about not having to notify anybody of anything. Okay, that's not where we were going, but just look at it. It's on the screen. I mean, very telling. So let's take a look at page 77. Now remember, we're talking about infants here, that the teachers are infants. What are these infants doing? The infants are pretending to govern. There it is on the screen. It says, where the teacher of a public school contracted to faithfully and impartially govern and instruct the children to strictly conform to the rules established by the board of directors. We'll stop right there. And it says it all right there. They could have left the word govern out, but they put it in there. Why? Because anybody sending their children to those camps is saying, I don't want to govern my own heirs. If the camps are not the product and the origination of the Moors, then you're saying someone else can govern your heirs, and that your heirs can contract to get a vaccination without you being there. And that's like infants playing in the sandbox together, and one of them is issuing vaccinations to the other. And if we read a little further here, it says, where the teacher of a public school contracted to faithfully and impartially govern and instruct the children to strictly conform to the rules established by the board of directors, to perform all the duties required of her by Part A, Section 41 of the school laws, and it was provided in the contract that if she should be dismissed by the subdirector for a violation of any of the stipulations therein, that she would not be entitled to compensation after such dismissal. It was held that the subdirector had a right to dismiss her for a failure to control the school, even if she was not unfaithful in the discharge of her duties. So they know that that's the fiat that they're holding over the heads of the ones that are doing business as teachers. They're saying, if you don't make them conform, If you don't make them conform, we will fire you and not give you anything. That's why we needed to change out the money and put real money there instead of fake fiat. That way they don't have a say over whether what is taught is what we want it to be. We have a say, the only say in what our heirs learn. And then look a little further here, because, you know, and this is just a side note, they weren't even teaching the right times and seasons. This is where we, you know, this is just some affirmation of when we say, you know, 1442 on the ancient moon calendar, 1441 on the ancient sun calendar, and 2021 on the civil or Greco-Roman calendar. Here it says where the word month in school contracts is not defined by statute, careful officers and teachers avoid any question by making their contracts for a certain number of weeks. They don't want you to know that they've switched the times and the seasons and that now everyone is a corpse or an infant. They don't want you to know that. They're saying you can avoid questions, even being questioned about that, by just referring to it as weeks. It says the word month has various meanings, there being calendar months, solar months, and several kinds of lunar months. In law, the word month means either a calendar or lunar month. Yes, that's why we go by the ancient moon calendar. That's what 1442 and 1441 is all about. It is actually at law. That's the law. The stuff that they're putting out there is not the law. Those times are not even right. And they know it. They know it. It says the civil or calendar months are the months as adjusted in the common, and we're not the common, we're the nobility, in the common or Gregorian calendar, and known as January, February, etc., etc. A lunar month, the period of one synodical revolution of the moon, is in mean length 29 days, 12 hours, 44 minutes, and 2.87 seconds. But in popular usage, 4 weeks are called a lunar month. Under the Old English common law, the word month, whenever it occurred, was construed to mean a lunar month of 4 weeks. It's always been the ancient moon calendar. It's always been the ancient moon calendar. It says, except in mercantile contracts in which it was construed to mean a calendar month. It says, in some of the states, it is provided by statute that the word month used in contracts, instruments, and statutes shall be taken to mean calendar month. And here's the big, gigantic, important secret that we did not know, that even the times are governed by court action. The tendency of the courts of this country is to give the word the meaning of calendar month. So they were trying to change things. And in contracts such as that of a teacher, it is generally so held unless there is some statute to the contrary. In other words, when they say it's unless there's some statute to the contrary, what that means is unless the Moors speak, and since they knew that we were not saying anything, they said, okay, we'll have to just point them to statutes that say otherwise. So even putting 1441 and 1442 and our calendar time on our document is further indication of jurisdiction, of ancient sovereign jurisdiction. Everything that we're saying has been thought through, down to the very word, every little word. Every little word has been thought through. And it matters. See, this is what erudition is all about, is some didn't want us looking at it word for word. But in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God from the very beginning. So we've always looked at words. And they have been attempting to govern the heirs by the Word. It's all in the Word. Word is jurisdiction, right word. We know that. So let me not put any emotion into this any more than is necessary. But no one can tell me that the color of the words doesn't matter and that the case of the words doesn't matter. Can't tell me that. They're admitting that words matter. How the words are presented and all of that matters. It determines who's talking. Is it an infant speaking, or is it the heirs, the competent sovereign heirs? Don't tell me that it doesn't matter, because it does. And they're sitting here talking about various meanings. It means what we say it means. Now, that's another point that I want to make, because with ancient English, here they're saying that just one word, and this goes for all the words, has various meanings. That's why we use ancient English as our national expression. Because it gives the words the meaning that we intend for it to be. They're already admitting there that it can mean whatever the Moors say it means. Or if we don't say anything, they can assign their meaning to it. So for some that say, oh, you can't spell it that way, you all can't spell. Oh, yes, we can. We're actually spelling correctly when we spell it the way we want to spell it. That's actually the correct way to spell. It's however the sovereigns want to spell it. Because it's going to mean what we say it means. A word as simple as month, but as powerful and as important as month, because it determines the jurisdiction. I mean, this is now something I wanted to point out to you as well. We know we pointed out that the teachers are infants and that they're not qualified, okay? But let's just look at, this is page 81. Let's look at this last paragraph here. It says, as has been stated, in treating of the conditions of the contract, the law does not insist upon the highest talents. That means you don't have to be smart to be a teacher. And I'm not putting teachers down. I'm just reading from the book and talking about the difference between an erudite Moorish Holy Temple of Science teaching our heirs versus an education camp. It says here, but it does require the teacher to bring to his work at least average ability and the usual industry and application to the discharge of his duties. Let me tell you something about the word discharge. Whenever you see the word discharge, what it means is that you're doing something because someone else either isn't doing it or can't do it. That you're helping, you're doing something, you're taking the place of someone who can't do it for themselves. Either can't do it or won't do it. That's what the discharge of duties is all about. That's what the discharge of debt is all about. We can discharge debt. Why? Because they don't have any, they can't do it. They don't have any resources to do it. They've incurred the debt. It's their responsibility. So we just print up some diallarium so that they can do their duty. The discharge, you've heard the one doing this, it says Kamala Harris, when she raised her right hand and said she would faithfully discharge the duties of vice president. That means she's not even supposed to be doing that. That those duties belong to someone who's qualified and not an infant and not a part of a corporation. That's what discharge is. That's what House Joint Resolution 192 is all about from 1933. That was the court that's saying the Moors are not printing their own money, so we're going to have to discharge all the debt because the Moors aren't doing it. So we have to come up with a way to deal with the debt. We're just going to discharge it. That means they pretended to pay it because we wouldn't. Now it's our turn. We're going to discharge the debt. It's not even our debt. But because this is our vast estate, anything that goes on in our vast estate, it's our responsibility to make sure that everything is in alignment with the law. That's what diallarium is all about, is we're going to get past all of that debt. Period. Because it's not ours. But it has to be accounted for. It has to be accounted for. There are conveyances on the land. There are utilities and things on the land. Still not our debt, but it's our resource. So as competent heirs, we say, okay, let us discharge that. Discharge is doing something that someone who's supposed to do it can't do. That's all discharge is. They will stop pretending to be government, which they already have, really. They've already acquiesced. But they will stop that mess altogether, even in their fake media, when the real government continues to govern. Even their media has to get in alignment, and they know it. That's what discharge is all about. A teacher talking about discharging some duties and not even qualified to do so. That's why the duties are discharged instead of performed. Because you're supposed to perform duties. You're supposed to do the duties, not discharge them. Let's look here at, and we'll show you yet again how the law doesn't even require education camp teachers to be smart. Doesn't require that. It doesn't. The law does not require that. Does not insist upon the highest talent. Well, who has the highest talent? the ones making the law, the ones who are the law, the Moors. Because again, remember, we said it's our land. Here's a grant. Build a school for your folks, not for us, for your folks. We have our temples. Oops, where are our temples? Just asking. Just something to think about. And yes, they are manifesting. They continue to manifest. But the temple had to manifest first in the air, within us. So let me take you to page 75 of this book. So that you can see further what page is this? Oh, that's 71. Just 1 moment. Let's make sure that we get to the right page. Here it is. Here it is again, same thing that we just read a little earlier. It says the law does not require the highest order of talents or qualifications in the future. It only requires average qualifications and ability and the usual application to the discharge of his duties to fulfill his contract. What are they saying? They're saying that since the Moors, who are the highest order of talent and qualification, are not doing it, then it's not required because the Moors are the law. The Moors are the law. And if the Moors aren't doing it, then they're not even qualified to perform the duties. They have to discharge the duties. In other words, they're just doing it until the Moors wake up. That's what discharge means. And what are we doing with the debt? When we wake up, we discharge the debt because they couldn't do it. Are there any questions or comments or anything of that nature with regard to what we have stated and shown here? Because the matriarchs, this is important, and also for our sons too, but this is important where the heirs are concerned. This is highly important. I've always stated it, and I'll state it again. Those subjects are not lawless when we're in our proper status. They're just doing what they can do. And then we wake up and we do what we're supposed to do on our land. They are not, and this is not an ego statement, they're not competent to teach the heirs, period. They're stating it right there. That's why their duties are discharged until the Moors wake up and teach, and we provide erudition to our own heirs. They're not qualified. They're not competent to do it. They don't even have to be, and they know that. So we had all of these high expectations for our heirs, but then when we looked at who was teaching the heirs, we're like, wow, no wonder it's a prison, a a public school to prison pipeline. What does that look like? What is a public school to prison pipeline? That is keeping the beneficiaries captured strategy. If the Moors won't teach their own heirs and won't have their own temples, schools, temples, then we'll just put some unqualified, incompetent, and I'm not saying that about all, I'm just saying the system. I'm not talking about individuals, I'm talking about the system. Because we know there's some really smart, loving, amazing teachers. We've all had them. There's still many like that. Well, I don't know about many, but they do exist. And so the system said, we'll just, if the Moors won't teach their heirs, we'll just put some curriculum there that's halfway made up, et cetera, and make sure that we prepare them for prison. And then when they had one who could rise above that and not go to prison, they said, what? Our whole system is a success because out of the 50 million of them, we got one here who went to college. We got one here who got all A's. Our whole system is a success. But 50 million or 49,999,999 of them went to prison or were on, set up for failure. It's our turn to absolutely provide the erudition, the sovereign, noble, high sciences. High sciences. And when I say high sciences, I mean high sciences in every area. To our heirs. The high sciences to our heirs, so that they manifest their nobility. We already know they have it. It's to the point now where their nobility is oozing out, and they're like, what is that? Why am I like that? Why am I so honest and so noble? Meanwhile, people are being dirty over here, and our heirs are saying, where is that coming from? Why can't I just do any old raggedy thing? It's because your nobility is oozing out of you. And it's up to us to provide guidance where that nobility is concerned, so that our heirs won't find it foreign. And so that they will see the advantages of it. Because it puts them right on up there with the sciences, high sciences, way up there. From an erudite position that matches their bloodline and birthright status. So I had some other things that I wanted to bring out. Oh, you know what? I'll just take 5 minutes to do it, 5 or 10 minutes. I want to show you really quickly. And we've shown this previously, but I want to show it to you yet again. Because we've been talking about courts, our courts. And I want to show you here really quickly where it's talking about the Moorish court from way back in the day. Just one moment, let me see. I believe it's right here. Okay. So, and a lot of this is from the 1880s, where they're talking about the Moorish court. In fact, let me put this on the screen so you can see. First, put it in the chat. If you go here to this website, it's the National Archives at the UK. So it's talking about records created or inherited by the Foreign Office, and they're calling themselves the Foreign Office. Okay, so they're saying we inherited some records. What are these records about? And you can see here, they're talking about slave trade and African departments, claims, foreign compensation, treaty and royal letter department, consular courts and other extraterritorial jurisdictions, Chinese Secretary's Office, British Middle East Office, tribunals, commissions, etc. So they're talking about, of course, courts, consular courts, etc. So what I did when I came to this website is I put in the word Moorish, I searched it. And all kinds of things came up. All kinds of things came up with regard to us from way back in the day. 1904 and 1905 is talking about Moorish loans. And you can read about Moorish loans. And again, remember now, 1904, 1905, we're not talking about a corporation over there in not fake Africa, in the other Africa, because it wasn't even created. That was 1956 is the date that the corporation was created. We're talking 1904, 1800, etc. Here it is right here, look, on the screen, correspondence with Moorish authorities. And know that Tangier and Rabat and those legations were actually on what we call the East Coast today of America, the East Coast of ancient Morocco. Okay, so again, that other Morocco over there was not even, corporate Morocco was not even in existence. And then when you talk about the, yes, Justice Jezreel put in the chat, New York is Fez. Yes, it is. Yes, it sure is. It sure is. These correspondences with Moorish authorities, when you start to look through them, you will see where they were doing things with regard to Muslims being detained by foreigners. And there was correspondence going back and forth simply because the Moors had started to not know who they were. And again, this was the 1800s, the early 1900s, where we were forgetting who we were. And so then there had to be some correspondence going back and forth, like, why do you have the Moors? Why are you holding them when you know who they are? But then in the correspondences, we can see where the Moors were not paying attention as much to the capitalism. And and again, 1871 happened. 1871 was just when the United States Corporation Company said, we're not going to be the republic, we're going to capitalize the United States of America and put it in all capital letters and dead ink, and we're going to do things that way. Well, after that, they started capital, you can look through the correspondence, where they started changing the status by way of the word and the presentment. And then they start taking more, and then they start playing word game by stating that consent was given because of them agreeing to corporate processes. For example, whenever in a lot of these correspondences, you can see where Moors would go into those state courts. That's where all of it started, really, is we were not going to the courts that were the Moorish courts. And I will say this, that the courts looked similar, except they had capitalized the lettering and put it in dead ink and started issuing their documents instead of ours. Well, only we can issue our documents that's going to properly proclaim the proper jurisdiction. So in these are great study tools. Let's take a look at, let's see. Here are the records of the consular courts. And let's see, they even, let's take a look and see where the Moorish consular courts, so those are the records that we're really interested in. Let me go back up here, Moorish consular.
Islam?
Islam.
Yeah, Justice, as you're going through, flipping through the page there, I'm noticing all the sections where they talk about legation as opposed to delegation.
Yes. 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 Thank you for that. Yes. So again, when we were talking about delegations of authority, we were saying don't send an ambassador to assist. So that word was not even the right word to use. We were asking, where's your delegation of authority? And they're saying, you don't know what the word delegation means, so we're going to keep doing what we're doing. Delegation, the word leg. Now, when we talk about Allah, arm, leg, arm, head, that's a hint. The word leg is at the root of all the words that have to do with whether we show up or not, and whether something is lawful or not. Delegation means to cut the legs off of the ambassador or the Moorish, whoever it is that's coming to assist. That means no legs, period. Let's just break it down to its basics. Legation, the very first building over in corporate Morocco, the very first building on the United States Historical Register is the United States or the American Legation Building. So that has everything to do with authority. So then, even if we said, where is your legation of authority? We would actually be asking, where are we? We will be asking, where are we? Because we're the legation of authority. That means we've arrived. So let me pull up. I'll do an advanced search because some of these, all of these words, any of these words. And I apologize that I did not mark. I should have marked where I saw that, because they have the records of the Moorish consular court. And let me go back to where I was initially. Okay. I'm going to put in a date because I know they had some dates of the courts here, Moorish consular court. But needless to say, much of what is on this website is going to show what we were doing. And this website is a British website. Okay, it's a British website. So what does Britain have to do with us? It's where Britain was the quote unquote financial place. Okay. Let's see. Handbook of Moorish Army. That's going to be important. The Handbook of Moorish Army. And this is in the UK. And we said earlier that a lot of the older documents with regard to us, the Moors, here at America would be in the UK archive, because they're the ones who came over here with the attorneys and all of that, and they took the records and hypothecated the records. And what did they do with the original records? They took them and filed them and put them somewhere where we wouldn't be able to see them until now. And then even when we look at the records, we have to actually put them in their proper status and place. Handbook of the Moorish Army. Have you known, and this is how you know it's about us too, because this was written in 1909, did the corporate Morocco over there, did they have an army in 1909? No, they did not. No, because they weren't even in existence. They didn't come into existence as a corporation until 1956, period. So let's see. I wanted to show, and we will see the court piece. I'll go just a little further in these records. Okay, here it is. Look at this. Recommendations for settlement of Moorish land claims. And again, this was in 1919. It says it right here on the screen, 1919. Well, where were the Moors? And it says it right here. British delegation correspondence and papers on political matters relating to America, Oceania, and Morocco. This is about settlement of Moorish land claims. And because we were our courts, we needed to go to our own courts and not a foreign court. They're admitting here held by a foreign office. That means they're foreign from the Moors. British instigation of a Moorish revolt, that's going to be a good read. Assault by Moorish subjects. It's going to be a good read. Handbook of Grand Moorish Bazaar. I mean, these are just correspondence relating to training of Moorish soldiers sent to Gibraltar from Morocco. So if, first of all, there was some saying, oh, Moors are not a thing. That's not real. You know, that's not real. There it is right there. Absolutely. And it has everything to do with this landmass here. Gibraltar is not even where they said it was on the map initially. And here they're putting the word Moorish. It says 4 Moorish merchants of Tunis. That's in all lowercase letters. Who seek reparation for the loss of their cargo freighted on a ship stolen by George Aptow. That's going to be interesting to read as well. And hold on, let me go back, because I wanted to show quickly about, it's talking about a baptism. Wrapper for documents relating to the baptism of the young Moorish servants. Again, the Christian, that whole Christianity piece where they're baptizing and all of that, those are for servants and subjects. They're baptizing someone who is a servant of the Moors.
Islam?
And that, Islam, nobility.
Yeah, they use the baptism ritual to bring people into the jurisdiction, and then when the child is born, the christening ceremony is what they use. That was just a ritual to bring them into the jurisdiction.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. That's what baptism is all about. Jurisdiction. It's a jurisdictional ceremony. Look at these documents. This is 1878, June 1878. Note to Spanish Foreign Minister on protection of Moorish subjects. The 7th of June, 1878. Here, appeal by Moorish Muslims to the Islamic world against French occupation of Morocco. Now, isn't that talking about basically the lead up to the 1952 case of the United States nationals at Morocco? That's really what this is the lead up to. Some of us did rebut French occupation of our land, but we had to do it competently. Okay, and this tells you about some of the identification documents for Moors. Look here, it says here, this is about a conference, okay? It's a general conference. It's a court action because it says case number 3, paper 4230. Reports cannot confirm Moorish Minister for Foreign Affairs sent to conference. Moorish authorities do not credit it. We are the creditors. We're the authorities. Always have been and always will be. Always have been. They know that. Tell me they don't know it. Yes, they do, because it's in writing everywhere. It's everywhere. I do want to show here it is. Private correspondence with the Moorish court. This was in from 1880 to 1886. There was no Moorish, Morocco over there in 1880 and 1886. And the reason these court actions start around this time is because 1871 had happened. And things started changing with the courts and the claims and everything because the United States Corporation Company had incorporated. And then we're claiming to be the government here. And this is where things started getting switched around. And it's our job to continue to put things in its rightful place. It's our job to do that. Private correspondence with Moorish court, 1884. Here's one, correspondence with Moorish authorities relating to visits paid to the Sultan's court. Everything that we did was a court action. Even private communications were court actions. And here it is. We know that the ones doing business as British Moorish subjects, there's some information here about them. In 1943, the question of jurisdiction of French courts in respect of British Moorish subjects. So we do have subjects and they know their subjects. So take the time, the link is in the chat and the link to this will also be under this video on YouTube so that you can look through some of these documents and just look at some of the language that they're using. Look at some of the things that we were doing. Yes, it's all about this landmass and the Moors and America. Here, Supreme Court of Judicature, High Court of Justice, dealing with Moorish affairs. With that being said, it is more research material. Yes, I feel the same way, Justice Israel. He's put more research material. It's almost like someone laid out a buffet and said, hey, get whatever you want. So are there any questions or comments with regard to any of the things that we've shown today? I can even show you in the book that we were looking at earlier really quickly about the pandemic and where the schools get their information with regard to that. Let me show you really quickly in this book here. It's on page 82. Let's see where we are, 79, 80. '81, 82. Okay, here. Paragraph 2, page 82. If a teacher is employed for a definite time and during the period of his employment the district officers close the schools on account of the prevalence of smallpox in the city and keep them closed for several months on that account, and the teacher continue ready to perform his contract, he is entitled to full wages during such period. The act of God is not an excuse for non-observance of a contract unless it renders performance impossible. If it merely makes it difficult and inexpedient, it is not sufficient. Although under such circumstances it is eminently prudent to dismiss school, yet this affords no reason why the misfortune of the district should be visited upon the teacher. So again, for they were even talking about all of that as well. And it says here, the remedy of the board for failure of the teacher is dismissal. The teacher has one of two remedies: action on the contract or a writ of mandamus. Mandamus, and not an action for money had and received, is the proper remedy to compel a clerk of the school district to pay over money in his hands applicable to a warrant issued in favor of a teacher for salary. They're saying here that the writ, as opposed to the money, see, either you can do a writ of mandamus, or you got to tap dance and do whatever it is they say. You have to do the contract, stay in contract with them, or bring the law into the picture. That tells us that it's all about the law. We command mandamus there. Yes, mandamus means that. Mand and command or command, same word. That's the root word. The root word is man. And U.S., for example, we say sumus. Sumus, U.S. means we. Us as a suffix means we. Okay. With that being said, are there any questions, comments, etc., with regards to anything that we have brought forth at this time? Islam. With that being said, we will be back tomorrow at 7 p.m. on Thursdays. Every Thursday we're at 7 p.m. Eastern. And we'll have some more information for you at that time. Peace and grand indigenous, natural divine heirs, Islam.
Peace and grand rising, heirs.
Peace and grand rising.
Peace and grand
rising, yes.
Islam.
Peace and grand rising.
Thank you, Empress. Islam. Islam. Thank you. Islam.
Grand rising.
Islam. Grand rising nobility.
Peace and love.
Islam.